Jai. There was a red pillow I had stuffed in that corner. No, it's no longer there. Yuck. That's what works. I don't know what. Give me that one. Thank you. Last week are gone. That's all right. Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devye Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindevyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Stavakaya Chadharmasya Sarva Dharma Sarupine Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devye Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindevyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Sarashiva Samarambham Shankaracharam Ajmam Ashmarachara Prayantam Vande Gurum Paramparam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Reva Param Brahman Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Om Saraswati Namo Nidam Bhadra Kalye Namo Namaha. Jai Ma. We're picking up after a few weeks. So the last 2 weeks we had some. Last week, because of Holy Mother Sharada Devi's Titi Puja, we read about her birth and her marriage and like that. And then the previous week, we had revered Swami Bhajanananda Saraswati from Chinmaya Mission. He gave a very beautiful talk on the, what was it? Minakshi Pancharatra. Pancharatra of Adi Shankaracharya. Very beautiful talk. Many esoteric things, very simply described. That's his specialty. But what we were reading before, we've been reading from Swami Vivekananda's Bhakti Yoga, and the section we were on, we only got about halfway through last time, 3 weeks ago. I think in the traditional, in the complete works, I think it's called The Method and the Means or something like that. The version I have, it's simply How to Cultivate Bhakti. It's probably a better title, but it's not the original title from the book. It's about the methods. And it was especially, he was giving a commentary on a verse from Ramanuja's commentary on the Brahma Sutra. And it's a peculiar verse. I'll read it. Swamiji's unpacking. He spent a lot of time first talking about purity of food. That's one of the things mentioned in the verse. The attaining of bhakti comes through discrimination, controlling the passions, practice, sacrificial works, purity, strength, and suppression of excessive joy. So there's a weird, usually we don't think of the suppression of excessive joy as an obstacle, as a goal, but we'll understand what he means by this. And then he starts talking about, that's the verse Swamiji's commentating on, and he talked about purity of food, and we spent a lot of time translating that original verse from the Upanishad that says, if you remember, from purity, from ahar sattva, Shuddho, ahar, if I remember the verse. Ahara shuddho, sattva shuddho, shuddha, sattva shuddho, smriti shuddha, something like this. I may be getting it wrong. If I can get it kind of right, I'm very proud of myself. Smriti shuddho. What is it? Well, I'll give it a try. From purity of food comes purity of mind. Or actually, we talked about it, actually it says the sattvic qualities are purified. Not just purity of mind, but in the body, the sattvic part of the body, of our system, is the mind. So it's not a bad translation. From purity of food comes purity of mind. From purity of mind comes purity of memory. Right? And when the memory, and what's that memory? We remember God. And if you remember God, then it says that all the bandhas, all the things that bind us, mukto, we can become free. So it's a very clear. The claim is a very strong claim. Is that if your food is pure, you will attain liberation. If from that, it's steps to attain liberation. And so, because of this, we mentioned that a lot of people, because this seems from food, that's we can control food, and religion has done a very good job controlling food. 90% of religion can be sometimes summarized in dietary restrictions, do's and don'ts, and cloven foot and not cloven foot, and all these strange things. We have all things we can control food, right? Every religion has its own taboos and restrictions for food, and so that's good, because that's from the physical food we take that has a tremendous effect on the mind, the sattvic qualities of the mind, right? But Shankaracharya gave the further interpretation of how to mean everything we take into the senses, not just food, right? And so what we see, what we hear. And so we should, by making sure what we see, hear, taste, smell, observe, that is pure, then the mind becomes pure, the memory becomes pure, all obstacles, all our bondages are freed. We're freed from all bondages. So that's good. But then Shankaracharya gives a further, subtler interpretation of that. He says, it's not just making sure, not just our food is pure, but everything is pure that we take into the senses. Actually, everything we take into senses, what is it? It's just external stimulus, a non-real stimulus on a very subtle trick of our consciousness that we call the mind, right? And so because of that, we get completely bewildered by everything we take in by the senses. So ahar shuddho means a pure relationship with everything we take in the senses, knowing none of it's real ultimately, and therefore nothing affects you. That's Shankaracharya. Swamiji quotes Shankaracharya, takes it to a very kind of absolute level. It's not just, but food restrictions still important, because that's something we can control. And in religion, we talked about this, we give a lot of emphasis to what we can control, because it's actually not easy to control everything we take in through the senses. Right, and it's definitely not easy to have a pure consciousness and pure awareness of everything of sense experience in general, completely detached and not completely unattached towards our sense experience. But that's maybe what's necessary. What we can do is control our food, eat sattvic food. Yoga has its own standards, but every religion has its own standards for that. And so we become very fanatical on food, because that's something we can control, right? And the fact is we can't control the mind, so we control. We control part of the mind, we control the body actually. But that's still not nothing, because the tongue is a lot. Even if we can be a little bit bold to give some interpretation of Ma's iconography in our classes on the Kali Sahasranama, we had to go break from that. As soon as we finish Swamiji, we'll go back to Sahasranama. I'm missing, those are very good classes. But when we got to her tongue has many meanings. One of the meanings that's given is that she's biting her tongue. Some say she's sticking her tongue out. She's lapping up the blood of Rakta Bija. There's so many ways we can understand. But yogis, I've been told by yogis who you're a Kali devotee. Do you know the Kali? Immediately giving a yogic interpretation. She's biting her tongue, right? Because the tongue is a lot. The tongue represents, of course, first thing we think it represents food and hunger, right? So by controlling the tongue, you control hunger, right? Not hunger, controlling taste. That's better. Hunger is a natural thing, but eating, controlling eating. And also, quick jump back, the color, the three colors of Ma is given. The Kali Yantra also is primarily black, white, and red. These are the colors of Ma. These are the colors of her shrine also. Colors of our kitchen, color of our temple, right? This is the theme, right? And so these are the three gunas, Rajas, Sattva, and Tamas, right? And so her teeth are described. The other day when Swami Shivatmananda gave the talk, one of the lines from that hymn to Meenakshi, that her teeth are like a row of pearls, right? Very beautiful, these white teeth, right? So her white teeth against her red tongue. So the red represents Rajas, and the white teeth represent in this symbolism Sattva. So Sattva controls Rajas. This is the idea, right? So she controls the Rajas of the tongue of taste. She controls another one, the Rajas of speaking, right? You control our speech. Actually, in the Bhagavad Gita, when he talks about control of the mind, control of the tongue, these different types of tapas, he gives silence as a way to control, right? So if we control the tongue that way from our name to speak, and then the third thing is represents sex also. So by controlling this, the sattva controls rajas, and thus giving the symbolic interpretation of this part of our iconography, thus you can transcend it. There's a verse in the it's called what's it called? It's translated as Nectar of Devotion. It's 12. I think it's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu or something. What is that nectar? Something like this, right? There's a verse. I wasn't thinking to speak like this, so I've gotten it jumbled. But it says when somebody can control control the tongue, the stomach, and the genitals, because they're considered connected. This means they're controlling rajas by sattva, right? Then that person, he or she, can make disciples all over the world. That's the qualification given. Rupa Goswami, Ji Goswami, I forget. Thank you, Rupa Goswami, disciples of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Right, so it's like just simply you can control the tongue, but it's not just control of the tongue. It's control of the tongue, speech, food, all these type of. When control, then that's itself is qualification to make disciples. Right, so you should look in. If somebody claims to be a guru, you should look in their kitchen, see what they're. Now we can know the truth. But you see the danger of that. You shouldn't just become too superficial. But anyway, so we read some of these things. I'm backtracking some things because I have to get myself caught up in order to continue. I've been out of practice for a couple of weeks. So Swamiji, in the second we read, he talked about control of the food, then controlling the passions. So we'll just read that. It's only a short paragraph. I'll read that again. Controlling the passions is the next thing to be attended to. To restrain the indriyas, the organs, from going towards the objects of the senses, to control them and to bring them under the guidance of the will, is a very central virtue in religious culture. Then come the practice of self-restraint and self-denial. This means tapasya, primarily. And there's this last couple of weeks, not thinking about this, probably just put it in my mind to begin to cogitate on it, is that we're in Buddhism and Bhagavad Gita, we know the desire that seemed our struggle is with desire ultimately, right? And Swami Holy Mother said if you have no desire, immediately you're free, right? And he says, and if you have a desire to have a piece of chocolate, you'll be reborn, right? For one milk sweet. Sufficient. Desire leads to rebirth. That's what the thing is. And we have so many desires, right? So being free, So we have to know what to do with talking about self-control and stuff. It's meaningless if we don't understand what's the energy behind it. And so we get confused. Either we think, the normal way we deal with desire is to satisfy them, right? That's actually very healthy. Actually, in most things, that's usually sufficient, right? It's like if you're hungry, eat something, then you're not hungry anymore. Right, but it's not going to be permanent. So if you want permanent satisfaction, eating something is not going to give it to you. You're going to be hungry tomorrow. You're going to be hungry, right? But for most small things, satisfaction is a natural thing. Because hunger, in its natural condition, actually desire in its natural condition is a God ordained system. So to keep the body going, you want the things you're supposed to want the things that you need to keep living, to keep living, to be happy, to be successful, to be dynamic, to be secure. All those things there's nothing intrinsically wrong, right? And in our natural state, and these can come naturally. And actually, even there's a line that says that a fish, if you take a fish out of water, it's gasping for water. Or you say he shouldn't be so attached, right? Why he has so much desire for water? It's a desire for water that's led to his suffering. No, water is his natural element, right? The fact that he's gasping for water means he needs to be in water. So sometimes the fact that we desire something is because that's what we're supposed to have. That's proof that we're supposed to have it. But you can see at a certain point, taking that theory, you can see where it tips. all of a sudden we're wanting things that we don't need if we didn't have them, and maybe even be bad for us if we have them, like chocolate. No, those we need. It's maybe worth the rebirth. I don't know. But anyway, so one thing. Small desires, by satisfying, they're probably okay. But you can see there's bigger desires. Satisfying doesn't fix them, right? And the scriptures use this example of pouring ghee into fire. If you pour fuel into fire, it doesn't put out the fire, right? It makes the fire bigger, right? Of course, all these examples can be taken too far, because you can say, oh, if you pour a bunch of ghee, it can put out the fire also. It's not exactly true, but you understand the gist of it. So that doesn't seem to always work also. And so the other option, we can swing to the other extremes, like, no, I won't. I'll fight all my desires, or whatever one I'm struggling with, and just completely deny it, right? And so that may have some benefit also. It has a benefit of being a type of tapasya, and it gives a little, sometimes, willpower strength, right? But, the danger of that is of an unfulfilled desire. And this is a test from everybody has memorized all verses in Bhagavad Gita. What does unfulfilled desire lead to? Anger, right? Yeah, that's the definition of unfulfilled desire is anger, right? And Krishna says in the Gita, triple are the gates to hell. Lust, anger, and greed. Right? It is lust, it is anger, it is greed, born of Rajaguna. That's the verse in the Gita. Right? And so lust and greed are just two versions of desire. One is in two different fields, and anger is when they're not satisfied. And if we analyze carefully, we've spoken about this before, that even all anger comes from frustrated desire. Even good anger, righteous anger. If you're angry what's going on in politics, if you're angry that children are being hurt, because we want children not to be hurt. We want things to go well. It's like there's even a good desire, when it's not satisfied, can also lead to anger. You have to know where anger comes from. So satisfying the big desire doesn't always make them go away, like pouring ghee into fire. And not satisfying desire leads to frustration. Right? So that's the situation. Right, so these two things, these two don't seem to be the best method, right? Still, some small desires can be satisfied and they go away, right? Other desires, by rejecting, they also go away, right? So you have to, so they're appropriate tools for certain things, right? Neem Kurli Baba, he has a very, very simple line. He said, if you want something, if you want a cup of tea and you don't drink a cup of tea, the desire goes away. The desire passes. It's another mystery. In the Gita it says, everything, heat and cold, pleasure and pain, I forget all these lists of dualities, all these things have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Right? They're temporary. Therefore, O Arjuna, just tolerate them. They'll pass. Right? One Swamini, Radhikananda Saraswati, a very wonderful, she hasn't come in a long time, from Bombay, sitting here, actually, she was saying that everything, that every desire has a time limit built in, right? And you can see, let's say we have some desire, right? And we're talking very general. We can all fill in we all know what we're struggling with, right? We have some desire, and it passes. If we don't think about it, or we don't think, eventually it just passes. Nothing survives, right? And she says, just wait 15 minutes. And it's this big thing that if we satisfy, will actually get us entangled, or become very frustrated, or really mess things up, right? Ruin our relationships, maybe have us arrested, ruin our health, whatever the desire could be, It's like, we don't need a 3-day waiting period. We need a 15-minute waiting period sometimes. That's all it takes. The waiting period of 15 minutes is sufficient, because it changes. We have to do a lot of work to keep it generated. And you see, we have desire, and we can't satisfy it, whatever it is. And then we're like, oh, now we're disappointed because we don't have the desire anymore. It's like we almost upset. Sometimes we're upset, our frustration that we don't still have the desire to get the joy or the frustration of satisfying the desire. So the Gita says that if you simply tolerate, you simply wait a little bit, it passes, right? And what happens when that happens? You're neither fighting it, you're not trying to fight it, or you're not trying to satisfy it. You're simply letting it be, right? And it comes It rises as a vritti and goes down as a vritti, right? And it's like at the end of it, it's like, well, that wasn't so bad, right? You know, it's like if you swim in the ocean, you know how to some waves you dive under, some waves you fly over. Once in a while you get knocked down, you know. But a good swimmer knows the how to deal with these waves, right? A very so in I'm not even. I have to go back to the text eventually. There's a verse, a very beautiful verse in the Sundur Lahari, also by Shankaracharya, where and it's a very interesting verse. It says that all other gods and goddesses, right, give their hands are showing blessings, right? Not Baramudra, they're giving blessings, but not yours. This is describing the form of Lalita Devi, that particular form. And usually we think like Ma, one hand is Abhaya Mudra, one hand is Varamudra, giving blessings, right, boons or something like that. And Lalita, her picture is the third here, right, also has this hand like this, right? He says, but you are the only one in this beautiful poem that is not giving blessings with the position of her hand. So what is it that this hand is not giving blessings? You know, she's the only one that doesn't satisfy your desires, won't fulfill your prayers. That's a very strange way to praise her, right? Oh, this verse is glorifying her because of this. But then it's a very subtle thing. Actually, she's not giving blessings, she's pointing to her feet, right? So actually when we go to Divine Mother and ask for our desires, she's showing actually what you really want is my feet, right? So St. Augustine said that in the Confession that our hearts are restless, so they rest in Thee, right? The thing we really want is God, right? And God can give us every number of things to temporarily satisfy us, but what we really want is God. So she's showing she's not. You can have everything, no problem. That's the material you work. There's a world of karma. If you want something, you can work in theoretically through your karmas and complicated relationships with everything. You know, we can get some things, right? But it's not really satisfying our actual inner hunger, right? And so I like this. This is my favorite. I mean, it's a big book, but the line that I remember, that I think about almost daily, is our hearts are restless, so they rest. This is what we actually want. So she's showing what we really want is union with her, right? And so that's the real. So this also changes our view towards our desires. Is that whatever, sometimes they manifest very naturally and healthy. Sometimes they're a little bit tweaked due to painful experiences and karmas and relationships, and they can get dangerously tweaked. They become actually unhealthy and neurotic and become dark and depressed and whatever the thing is. But behind them all, if you untangle them all, what we want is fulfillment. We want union. We want satisfaction. My Guruji used to say that if we want what we want infinite and eternal joy, right? That's what the heart actually wants, right? And so, if we know that we want infinite, we want something that's infinite and eternal, and where do we seek it? We seek it in where we can get it, right? In temporary and limited things, right? So if you seek a permanent value from a temporary object, or if you seek an infinite value from a limited object, what happens? Again, you become frustrated, right? And so if you expect, like, if you're hungry and you eat something, that's like, oh my God, I've now frustrated. No, that's natural. You don't expect permanent satisfaction from a bowl of rice or something, right? You expect temporary satisfaction. It's okay. That's appropriate to what it can give. But what we really, really want is infinite happiness. We want, and therefore we become frustrated. You use his own language. He said, "Frustrated we are." That's his language. That's a fact. It can be. Not everybody, but this is. Then comes practice of self-restraint and self-denial. The immense possibility of divine realization in the soul cannot become activated without struggle and without such practice on the part of the aspiring devotee. The mind must always think of the Lord. It is very hard at first to compel the mind to think of the Lord always, but with every new effort, the power to do so grows stronger in us. By practice, O son of Kunti, this is in the Gita, And by non-attachment is yoga attained, as Sri Krishna in the Gita. And then as the sacrificial work is understood, that the 5 great sacrifices had to be performed as usual. We ended up talking about the 5 sacrifices last 3 weeks ago. So we're picking up exactly where we left off. Purity is absolutely the basic discipline. Purity is absolutely the basic discipline, the bedrock upon which the building of bhakti rests. This is what I call an underline verse. I haven't used this term, but in my own, this is how, when you learn to take notes, and I took a class on how to survive in college, my first class at OCC, and the first thing they showed you is how to take notes and how to put the underline. We had 2 things. We had a red underliner and a highlighter. Highlighting is different than underlining. There's a technique. I didn't know this, but it helped. Still, even I don't use it when I read, but I still, I mentally highlight. These are important areas, but then there's the point, like in the Gita, it always says, or like it says like, one who does this attains liberation, right? So that's an underlined verse. What is exactly that we have to do? And then you can work way back and find it. This is an underlined verse, right? Purity is absolutely the basic discipline, the bedrock upon which the building of bhakti rests. This idea of a bedrock or a foundation, if we've used this line before, that if you build a building without a foundation, right, you build an accident. You're building an accident. It's going to fall, right? You can't help it, right? So most of building a building is the foundation, right? Everything else comes quickly. When you were in Prakash were building our kutir, how much work went into the digging and pouring concrete and laying down rebar and the whole thing. Foundation and shoveling and carrying dirt. That was very and then once that was done, pow! In a couple of weeks, the building goes up, the drywall goes in, the electricity goes in, the roof goes in, everything's painted, and everything goes quickly. Foundation is a lot of work, right? So that's because actually, why purity is the foundation. Actually, Sri Ramakrishna said, Swamiji says, that bhakti is not something we have to attain. We already have it. The soul's nature the soul's nature is union with God. The soul's nature is to want union with God. Right? Love is natural. And Sri Ramakrishna gives the example Sri Ramakrishna uncovers 1,000 pages of philosophy in one story sometime, one example of a magnet attracts a needle, right? So it's not the needle doesn't need to do anything to be attracted to a magnet. It's the nature of the magnet to attract metal, and it's the nature of metal to be attracted. Right? It doesn't have to do anything separate, right? But still, you have a big magnet and a needle, and nothing happens, right? So you see what's wrong, right? One thing is that either it's not close enough to feel so that's why we think of God and we do things to get close, although there's no distance really. But the other thing is, if the needle is encrusted in mud and dirt or clay, right, then you can put a needle right over it. Nothing happens to nothing happens to the magnet. If you wash the mud off the magnet, off the needle, should I say? Sorry. As soon as at a certain point, as soon as the dust, the mud is washed away, immediately the needle flies towards the magnet. Right, so this is actually all spiritual life. My sannyas Guru Swami Bhajanananda, he says again and again, sadhana is only for one purpose, manas shuddhi. There's no second purpose, the purification of the mind. By manas means, we would in Western way of thinking, we would say the heart. Right, but that's the heart. We consider heart it's in the category of manas in yogic literature. Right, manas shuddhi, purification of the mind, of our inner being. Right, there's no second thing. It's not like that mantras get God. They purify the heart. Right, when the heart's pure, bhakti love automatically comes. And so, what's the goal? If union with God or the vision of God, however you want to conceptualize that. That we always say that God stands self-revealed in the presence of devotion, right? Purify the heart, devotion comes, and in devotion, God's realized automatically. They're the same thing, right? Therefore, that verse that's structuring this whole section, from purity of food, beep 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 beep, liberation, It's like from this to that. If you work on if the foundation is good, you'll get a beautiful outcome. That's the point. The bedrock. Purity is absolutely the basic discipline, the bedrock upon which the building of bhakti rests. So just like food is on different levels, so should is one of the. It's also one of the yamas, I believe, right? Saucha, right? So that's the same thing. So what's saucha? Saucha means cleanliness, means purity. Saucha means cleanliness. It's should means they're related words, but we have to think what this. The word he's translating from the verse is saucha, right? And it starts with external cleanliness, right? But so there's cleanliness in your surroundings. There's cleanliness, your physical cleanliness, keeping yourself clean, your clothes clean, your hair clean, right? And then yogis we always say, there's external cleanliness and inner purity, right? That's we use a different word for that, right? That's for the mind and heart have to be purified, right? But in between, yogis yogis of my guru's tradition, they're quite horrible, I tell you frankly, right? They take purification to another. Internal purification is also done with all kinds of, with tubes and waters and scraping devices and all the kinds of very unpleasant things, right? But it works. There's a reason for it, right? Because he says, I remember one time Guruji wanted me to write a book on the asanas of our ashram tradition. I'm not very good at asanas anymore, so my mind has moved to a different state. The instruction's still there. The pranayama part of the book has been finished, but never really publicly printed. But he wanted to on the pranayama, on the asanas, and what he called the kriyas, the yogic kriya. These are the purification devices. Yeah, the shakriyas, right? And then he says, so his first introduction, he was telling me, you could start with the yamas and niyamas. This is natural. This is just general stuff. We always say start with yamas and niyamas, the background for the other practices of yoga. And he says, and for purification, start just like we're doing now. Start with for the body, and then of course purification of the mind and heart. But he said, don't leave out, the Sutneti and Jalneti and Shilpachalana and all those wonderful practices. So even those internal yogic practices, Swamiji is not talking necessarily about the internal yogic practices of the purification, the 6 kriyas. Classical, of course, kriya is used in many ways in the yoga tradition, but we're using it in the Hatha Yoga system. We're using it in that form. But they're also not just, of course, clean the body. That's okay. And if you can clear out your nasal passages and remove phlegm from your esophagus area and clean out your large and lower intestines and your colon and all these type of things. They have obvious health benefits to be clean. But even that is meant to purify the mind. Because between the physical body and the mental body, we have a whole structure we call the subtle body. Right, which and from yoga we think of it like the chakras and the 5 koshas and the nadis, and so all those are actually designed to purify the nadis, right? The benefit is that they purify the physical body, but that's also not by accident. Also, it's not just removing phlegm, for instance, right? Because the physical body is built upon the structure of the subtle body. If the subtle body is pure, the physical body changes. So you see somebody does a lot of yoga, even if they're doing it just for physical reasons. They change, right? People's minds change. All this, that's why people who get into Hatha Yoga, they're like, it's simply to look good or be healthy or flexible or because it's cool and trendy, right? It's like that's okay, but you see the result. Sometimes it's like their consciousness changes. Not for sometimes it's just the next class, that's a consciousness change, but sometimes it completely transforms people because you're transforming things on the inside. Your body changes, your mind changes. It has an effect, right? So cleanliness Shuddha is not just physical cleanliness, but it's also astral cleanliness of the subtle body and so the yoga kriyas and the like. But really, ultimately, it's manas shuddhi, the purification of the mind. We could purify the heart of our intentions, our emotions, our aspirations, our karmas, our samskaras, our vasanas. Like this means pure. Cleansing of the external body and discrimination about food are both easy. So all this about food and body is relatively easy, not that easy. But without internal cleanliness and purity, these external observances are of no value whatsoever. Right. You can see sometimes a clean body is a sign of a sattvic mind. Sometimes a clean body is a neurotic mind. Sometimes a clean body is just somebody who feels, you can fill in every. That's a great judge. Actually, even I'm going to take a detour for a few seconds into the Yoga Sutra. Each of the yamas, niyamas also has a siddhi associated with it. If you do this, you get this result, right? For cleanliness, what's the result? Anybody know the siddhi of being clean? Not what we think. It's actually considering not wanting to touch people, right? It's a very interesting thing because, and Swami Lakshmanju, in the video we see, somebody asked him about this, Mother Alice asked him about it, an all black and white, incredible black and white video of him. And he says, so if you wash yourself really well, scrub yourself, go to a Korean spa and get yourself scraped down, right? Completely clean. And then you clean your bathtub, completely clean your bathroom, fill it with clean water, and then sit in it for a half hour, and then stand up and look at the water. See, if you're really clean, you realize you're actually not that clean, right? And then you realize other people who aren't that clean, they're really not that clean, right? We cover everything, things we like to look at and like to touch, we cover with the idea that it's beautiful and pure and innocent, but it's not even skin deep. It's on top of the skin too. It's also not that clean, So he says that the result of being really clean makes you be very cautious of making not want to be in contact with other people's bodies. That's a siddhi of Saucha in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, right? But it's a little bite type thing. But also that's meant to lead ultimately to inner purity also, because even if you're really clean, you're not that clean. And physical cleanliness is easy enough, but even it's not really possible. The physical body is not like that. It's constantly excluding, it's emitting byproducts continuously, right? And it's clean enough to clean the house. Today, the last 2 days we've been cleaning, we're getting ready for Amavasya, in our weekly cleaning, we clean. So that's not easy. It's been hard work, a couple of days of fast work, right? But in 3-4 days, it's going to look dirty again, right? So it's not that hard, but it's also not permanent, right? That's the thing. And purity of food is not that hard, but it is not that hard. Like I say, we can read ingredients. It's like I mentioned. I gave an example last time that you read something. We bought some cookies to distribute for puja, and we're like, oh my God, these have egg in it, right? So we can't eat this. So let's go back to the store and go return them and get one without egg, right? In that process, we've killed so many more things than that are in the food. It's like, so it's not that easy, but it's comparatively easy, but it's also not successful, right? We try our best. Naturally, these are tendencies of heart. We're trying to change our consciousness, right? But on the physical level, it's relatively easy, but it's not. It can't possibly be the goal because it's impossible. Absolute non-violence, absolute cleanliness, absolute compassion. These things are not possible. So we have to be a deeper thing. Cleansing the external body and discriminating about food are both easy, but without internal cleanliness and purity, these external observations are of no value whatsoever. In the list of the qualities conducive to purity, as given by Ramanuja, they are enumerated as satya, truthfulness, arjava, sincerity, daya, doing good to others without any gain to oneself, ahimsa, non-injury to others by thought, word, and deed, anabhidya, not coveting others' goods, not thinking vain thoughts, and not brooding over injuries received from others. These are Ramanuja's classical list. In this list, the one idea that deserves special notice is ahimsa, non-injury to others. This duty of non-injury is, so to say, obligatory to us in relation to all beings. It does not simply mean, as with some, the non-injuring of human beings and mercilessness. That a word? Mercilessness. Is that the word he used? Mercilessness towards the lower animals. It does not mean It does not simply mean, as with some, the non-injuring of human beings and mercilessness towards the lower animals. Nor does it mean, as with some others, the protecting of cats and dogs and feeding of ants with sugar, with liberty to injure brother man in every possible way. These are the two extreme, right? We can be nonviolent to people but kill animals, or be kind to animals and kill people, right? And that's the problem. You can see there, it's the tendencies to these extreme tendencies are there. It is remarkable that almost every good idea in this world can be carried to a disgusting extreme. A good practice carried to an extreme and worked out according to the letter of the law becomes a positive evil. And he says, the stinking monks of certain religious sects who do not bathe lest the vermin on their body should be killed never think of the discomfort and disease they bring to their fellow human beings. They do not, however, belong to the religion of the Vedas. Actually, not only is he said this is not the Vedic tradition, but it's also not the Vedic. He's talking about a particular sect of Jains. It's actually not the Vedic tradition, but it's not meant to be an anti-Jain thing. But it's not. This is their extreme practice of nonviolence isn't Vedic, right? It's commendable in many ways because they're an extreme example of nonviolence, right? But the test of ahimsa. This is the test of ahimsa. In the Yoga Sutra, it says that in ahimsa, the benefit of ahimsa. Anybody know what the siddhi of ahimsa is in the Yoga Sutra?
No one will do harm in your presence.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this is given in the Bible as a lion lays down with the lamb, right? Natural enemies will not be enemies in their presence. This is the result of somebody who's truly fixed in ahimsa. So that is, but of course that doesn't mean, there's people who I know who never heard anything, and they eat only pure, non-violent, tamed relatively as far as possible, as far as their ability to control. They don't kill animals, they don't kill ants, they don't, yet in their presence, you can, even sometimes, we all know people who are really non-violent, that infuriate, and you become infuriated in their presence. The result of knowing them is you become angry. not the real result. The real benefit of meeting somebody somebody fixed in ahimsa is you cannot be angry, right? Because your vasanas become controlled, right? The very vasana of anger goes down. So Swamiji is going to unpack it a little differently, but I'm just remembering that it's an important line. The tense of ahimsa is absence of jealousy. This is Swamiji's definition. This is the test. Any man may do a good deed or make a good gift on the spur of the moment or under the pressure of some superstition or priestcraft. But the real lover of mankind is he who is jealous of none. The so-called great men of the world are seen to become jealous of each other for a small name, for a little fame, or a few bits of gold. So long as this jealousy exists in a heart, it is far away from the perfection of ahimsa. The cow does not eat meat, nor does the sheep. Are they great yogis, great non-injurers? Any fool may abstain from eating this or that. Surely that gives him no more distinction than a herbivorous animal. If once I say it wrong, I can never say it right. I get programmed very quickly. I think you're closer. Actually, that's I read in one small book, conversation with Srila Prabhupada. He says that it's like somebody was saying, well, we're strict vegetarians, Swamiji. That's okay, but so are pigeons, right? It's like, and monkeys are vegetarians, pigeons are vegetarians, cows are vegetarians. It's like we want to be God conscious. We're doing this diet not because the diet is. I mean, sometimes for the sake of preaching, they have books that are preaching the ecological benefits and the health benefits of vegetarianism, because that's part of their kind of the public persona of spreading vegetarianism. But actually, he says we're Krishna bhaktas, and Krishna told us what he wants to eat, and we feed him that. He says, one offers me a leaf, a flower, fruit, some water, I will accept that, right? If he's so we eat what pleases him, right? And that's our goal. Because just being a vegetarian in this sense is not like I say, cows are vegetarian. Of course, we consider cows a spiritual animal, but they're not yogis. Maybe they were. Some text actually says from a yogi, the next birth is a cow, so it's the highest, very high birth. But anyways, that's a different point. Are they great yogis, great non-injurers? Any fool can stay from eating this or that, simply gives him more, or that. Surely that gives him no more distinction to herbivorous animals. The man who will mercilessly cheat widows and orphans and do the vilest deeds for money is worse than any brute, even if he lives entirely on grass. The man whose heart never cherishes, even in thought of injury to anyone, rejoices at the prosperity of even his greatest enemy. That man is a bhakta. He is a yogi. He is the guru of all, even though he lives every day of his life on the flesh of swine. He's quoting, I forget the verse, but he's quoting a known verse. I think that there's somebody, he's wording it to his audience. He's for shock value, but the verse itself is shocking. It's meant to be shocking. I maybe it'll come. It's in my head somewhere, but the translation is something like that they could be a very sinful, a very crude, very cruel cheat of a person, although he lives on. I think it's called havisha. This is it's considered like the purest yogic food. It's like basically it's like khichdi with no salt, right? It's like very pure, cooked in ghee. It's like very pure. This is like sadhu food. This is like the purest possible food. There's people who eat that, but they're still horrible people, right? And there's other people who are great devotees, right? And maybe they're eating pork, right? It's like that's not. We shouldn't use that as an excuse to go eat bacon today. You know, we're going to be great yogis, and you know, it's not like. But the point is, they're not sufficient. They're important, but not sufficient, right? These points, right? The man whose heart never cherishes even the thought of injury to anyone, who rejoices at the prosperity of even his greatest enemy. That's a hard one, right? That man is a bhakta. He is a yogi. He is a guru of all, even though he lives every day of his life on the flesh of the swine. Therefore, we must always remember that external practices have value only as they help to develop internal purity. That's the purpose of it. There's a line, either Jiva Goswami or Rupa Goswami, I don't remember. Their writings are not distinct enough in my head, unfortunately. But he says that there's actually only one yama and one niyama. Right? There's only one rule, one thing to do and one thing to refrain from doing. He says that always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. This is the one yama, don't forget Krishna, and the one niyama is always remember Krishna. Right? This is all the other rules and regulations of religion. That means all of them. We got shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves. Are servants of these two rules, right? The purpose of all the other things are to help us always remember God, never forget God. That's a good put in perspective. So in that case, actually, they're not all important, but they're not unimportant because they're meant to help us get to the ultimate goal, right? They may not be the exclusive way to the ultimate goal. We have to be a little bit liberal-minded on that, not judgmental like that. But we should be careful with ourselves that we're doing the external practices, not to give these practices up, the principles of yoga and religion like this, but to make sure that their goal is this transformation of heart and meditation, realization of God, and not get lost there. Therefore, we must always remember that the external practices have value only as they help to develop internal purity. It is better to have internal purity alone, when minute attention to external observances is not practicable. practicable. Right? So that's an important point also. It's not that we should give up, right? But sometimes you can practice, right? And so we have a friend, you know, he who was traveling, and he's a strict vegetarian, lifelong vegetarian, a strict vegetarian, and he was traveling in a country where where he tried his best, but you don't know if the food is pure. He ordered the best he could, but the pure food by his standards, by our standards, but there's no choice. He did the best he could, and he said, I don't know if I was a vegetarian. Maybe I was a vegetarian. I tried to be a vegetarian, right? And so the verse like reminded me, there's a verse when people challenged Jesus about his eating habits, with who he was eating with, and these rules and regulations of of the Jewish culture of his time, right, which are important and at that time quite strict in observance. And he made the statement, it seems to me it's more important what comes out of the mouth of God, of a man, than what goes into it. That's a famous line, right? So it doesn't mean that what comes into it is unimportant. That's not the point, right? But it's more important than what comes out. In other words, if you're speaking words of compassion, the internal practices are more, the internal qualities are more important if you cannot follow, if you're not always able to follow carefully the external. I mentioned this scene 3 weeks ago. I just read it again on Holy Mother's birthday. In the evening, I was reading the Gospel of Holy Mother, and the came back into my mind. One of her disciples, he was telling her, he says, I cannot. I work in a hospital, right? And the hospital, and by rabbinical standards of that time, you shouldn't eat in a hospital. Right, hospitals are ritually impure. They're maybe medically, miraculously necessary places, doing great good work, but they're not ritually pure, right? And for somebody careful about food, this food is very dangerous, right? Because there is dealing with sickness, it's dealing with death, it's dealing with birth, dealing with body fluids and blood, right? These are the things. These are all impurifying, right? And so the idea is I know devotees that they even work in hospitals, but what they do, then they go home, they bathe, they cook their fresh food, they don't eat like that. He says, but the situation is, I find myself having to, first he says, I find myself having to drink water at the hospital. Like with his test on what you would say. Right, and then he admitted a little bit more, but actually I also eat there. So maybe, I don't know, maybe he's even eating the food from the cafeteria, not just bringing his own pure food, with alms written on the outside of the containers or something, That's what I would do, We've done like this. And she said, no, what to do? You do your best, right? But your situation is, what are you going to do? You have to eat, right? So you think this food is coming from Sri Ramakrishna? Pray to him. The food will not, it will not damage your devotion. But even there, it's not like you'll lose your caste, or you'll become a sinner, or you'll become impure. It's actually really that you wouldn't lose your devotion. That's the goal of all these things is devotion, right? And so in that situation, eating something at work is not going to make you lose your devotion, right? It's not an excuse to eat impure food in impure places, not worry about who touches your food. And we should be careful as much as practical. But the goal is devotion. When somebody asked Holy Mother also, what did Sri Ramakrishna say about food? Actually, he didn't give any restrictions. Almost every other religious teacher in the world gives food restrictions, and the yogic traditions have. There's pages and books and books and books and books and books of food restrictions, right? Because that's the easiest thing to control. But Sri Ramakrishna wasn't interested in controlling external things, right? He wasn't. He wasn't like, we need to change the look of society. He changed people. It was internal change, right? And so actually he left people's food choices to themselves, right? And some of his disciples amongst his disciples, they had very wide extremes of food traditions, right? But one thing he says that he was universally, continuously insisted upon is that not to eat food from a shrad. This is from the death rituals that are done, the shrad ceremonies, that when the devotee should not eat food from those rituals. Right, he says that they damage your devotion. Now, I don't exactly know how that damages devotion, but Sri Ramakrishna, the only thing he said about food, his other disciples wrote commentaries on yogic scriptures. They go, like even Swamiji's going about food. But the overlooking principle of Sri Ramakrishna is that how it affects devotion. Food, for whatever reason, food associated with these funeral rites, he forbade. And then people would ask him, but Thakur, we go to, imagine, even, especially in the Hindu family, somebody dies in your family and then you don't take the food from the ceremony and the feast and the bandar afterward, the damage to your family relations can be significant. People will be extremely offended, right? They feel, especially if you're a close relative, it can be complicated. And I myself found myself in complicated situations. How do you not eat, right? Then Thakur said, well, in the Hindu Shraddha ceremony, there's a portion of the food that's offered to Vishnu, some fruit and like that, some puja like that. Says If necessary, that food you can take. So another thing, oh, I'm fasting today, I'll just give me some of the fruit. Right? So you can if you don't offend everybody, you're taking prashadam, you're not offending like that, but you're also protecting like that point. So then we have the principle of being that's Sri Ramakrishna's only and single rule, right? We've built, this term we've used this term, the building a fence around the Torah. You know this term? This is like, for instance, if there's a rule, right, and to make sure that rule, like an example, sorry to be in front of them all, but there's a in the kosher principles, there's you can't keep beef and milk in the same kitchen, right? They can't touch the same pots, they can't touch the same fridge, they can't be in the same fridge. There's usually 2 refrigerators, like that. That's one of the principles of kosher, like that. That's a weird thing. Right, nothing wrong with eating beef, nothing wrong with drinking dairy, but dairy and beef cannot be in the same refrigerator, in the same kitchen, because there's a rule. There's a rule that, and it most likely it comes from a prohibition against a magical practice of the time. It was something like that, because it's a weird. I don't think that you cannot eat a calf that's been boiled in its mother's milk. It's a weird thing to think, but it's a weird how could that even happen in practical? It may have been a reaction to some actual or believed magical tradition of the pagan that they fought against or something. That's what most scholars think. But that's the rule. So that's never going to happen. Even if you eat meat and drink dairy, chances are that's never going to happen. But that's an important rule. It's an absolute rule. So how do you protect it? Right. So you start so all of a sudden meat, beef and dairy can never touch. It can never be in the same kitchen. So that there's no chance for it to happen. That becomes, we call that building a fence around the Torah. You interpret like on the 7th day you rest and don't work. That's the Sabbath, right? And you have Orthodox people that they pre-tear their toilet paper that day, the night before, because it's not supposed to work. Is that work? That's probably not work, right? But what if it is? Right, it's like just be extra strict on the things we know, right? So, on this one point, so like for instance, going to a funeral, it's not the same thing as Shraddha. Shraddha is a very specific Hindu ritual, right? With the bishop goes, but is the hors d'oeuvre table after a memorial service the same? Not quite, right? But my general thing is I don't take that food, at least cook parts and things like that, maybe, for the same principle of just being extra. Then Sri Ramakrishna said one thing, I'll do like one thing at least that one thing really carefully, So be careful about food from funeral services. We may actually finish this chapter. Therefore, we must always remember that external practices have value only as they help develop internal purity. It is better to have internal purity alone when minute attention to external observances is not practicable. But woe unto the man and woe to the nation that forgets the real internal spiritual essence of religion and mechanically clutches with death-like grasp all external forms and never lets them go. It's an exclamation point. So I'm sure Swamiji probably said it very dramatically. Woe to that nation! Woe to the religion! That right. This is prophetic voice. That woe to that clutches to the externals and completely ignores the internals. Right. And you can see that practically speaking, that's religion, and that's nations, and that's people. That's what's happened. Woe unto us, Swamiji. Woe is we don't use woe enough. It's such a great rhetorical, powerful thing. Woe unto thee, Yeah, we should have a woe emoji. That could be, yeah? I'm sure there is. That's perfectly good. It's a great line, I read it again. But woe unto the man and woe unto the nation that forgets the real, internal, spiritual essentials of religion and mechanically clutches with death-like grasp all external forms and never lets them go. The forms have value only so far as they are the expression of the life within. If they cease to express life, crush them out without mercy. This is Swamiji's style. The next means to attain the attainment of bhakti is strength, or anavasada. And then he quotes from the verse that he quoted a lot from the Upanishads. This Atman is not to be attained by the weak. Swamiji, very often you think Swami Vivekananda, you see posters of him like this, the strength, the man-making religion and faith, strength is the new, that was a big call, right? Arise, awake. And he quotes this a lot, from verse in the Upanishads, that it's not by the, what is it, like, what do we need to attain? We need strength. Not just physical strength, obviously it's not just physical strength, but we'll go into it.
Enlightenment is not for sissies.
Exactly. Swami Vivekananda, modern interpretation. Yeah. This Atman is not to be attained by the weak, so says Shruti, the scriptures. Both physical weakness and mental weakness are meant here. The strong, the hardy, quote unquote, are the only fit students. What can puny, little decrepit things do? They will break into pieces whenever the mysterious force of the body and mind are even slightly awakened by the practice of any of the yogas. This is the thing. A little bit of awakening, the energy will just shatter them, right? You need at least enough strength to hold it. And then against what the purpose of purification, both internal and external, and purity of food. All these things go to create from pure food, from pure mind come all the five koshas. Like everything becomes purified and strong and ready, right? So otherwise, a little bit of awakening gets shattered, right? What was it on the other night? The yoga center, I told that story about the nuns. Oh yes, this is related, not exactly related, but there's a story from Ramakrishnananda at the yoga center in Costa Mesa. Many, many years ago I heard him say that some nuns, Catholic nuns, contemplative nuns, not active, not sisters, but they approached him, or somebody approached him. He was the only yoga center in Orange. He was the first yoga center in Orange County. He's been there 50 years now. So there was not much choices if you heard about yoga, And he says, well, our nuns, they meditate, we meditate and pray. And then the bliss comes. And then we die. Right? It's always the situation. As soon as we get some bliss, then we die. And so he looked at them and met them like that. And all he did, he adjusted their diet only a little bit. I think he taught them some simple breathing practices to strengthen their nervous system, and he had him eat green leafy vegetables. It was something like that, just change it out a little bit. And now they practice, the bliss comes, and they live a long life full of bliss. It's like the system has to, the thing is they have the practices to generate, but they don't have the background for the foundation. They've developed the experiences of a yogi without the practices of a yogi, which are designed to build a safe foundation to hold that building. Very interesting. It is the young, the healthy, the strong, these are quotes, that can score success. Physical strength, therefore, is absolutely necessary. It is the strong body alone that can bear the shock of the reactions resulting from the attempt to control the organs. He who wants to become a bhakta must be strong, must be healthy. When the miserably weak attempt any of the yogas, they are likely to get some incurable malady and weaken their mind. Voluntary weakening of the body is really no prescription for spiritual enlightenment. The mentally weak are also cannot succeed in attaining Atman. The person who aspires to be a bhakta must be cheerful. In the Western world, the idea of a religious man is that he never smiles, that the dark cloud must always hang over his face, which again must be long drawn, with the jaws almost collapsed. It's like we've all seen this type of the religious look. I can't even do it without laughing. In other places, Swamiji said that as a person that this is not religion, this is some mental morbidity. Better to lock yourself in your room. Don't spread your disease to others. Right. People with emaciated bodies and long faces are fit subjects for the physician. They are not yogis. It is a cheerful mind that can persevere. It is a strong mind that hews its way through 1,000 difficulties. And this, the hardest task of all, the cutting of our way out of the net of Maya, is the work reserved only for giant wills. Very beautifully said. Swami Shivananda, he also in one place he speaks about these exact points of Ramanuja, the list of qualities that a bhakta should develop, practice bhakti. And when he gets to this about this cheerfulness of mind, he says that partially is like faith that you can do it, is another cheerfulness of mind, right? Because you can see sometimes in the practice, and in some religious traditions, the practice is like is you become overwhelmingly conscious of your inability, of your sinfulness, of your fallen qualities. That and that has its own psychological power. So it's something we're not dismissing, but that's not what's meant here. That we should think. Swami Shivananda in that he says, what we want to do is very difficult, but not impossible, right? And the proof is so many have done it, right? So what quality this list of the qualities that they had to do it, right? Our Guruji, he was a very interesting person. He says, I met yogis at a young age, right? And he says, and I saw people, they were free, they were enlightened, right? The Siddhas, says, they've done it. That means it can be done. Right, so I had to learn from them how to do it. He took this to every, because he was a yogi. He applied the same principle to everything, right? So an example is he saw somebody with a very nice type of fountain pen. It was called a pelican fountain pen. I remember because we had to look for one. He saw somebody because he write letters. He liked fountain pens to write his letters. Back when letter writing was still a thing, right? And so he sent. I spent several months looking for a pelican fountain pen. And Carlos eventually spent several months. They're very expensive and hard to find. But he had us on this obsessive thing because other people have found them. It means they exist. It means I can also have them. He saw somebody, he used to take, everything he wore was orange, as appropriate for a sannyasi. And so he had high tops. Right? He was known as, everybody knew him as that Swami with the orange tennis shoes, right? And so he wore white high tops and with an orange marker, he'd color them in. It looked like everything was orange, So one time at the mall, he saw somebody walk by with orange Reeboks, bright orange Reeboks. They exist. He bought them. That means they can be had. It was very long, a lot of work, several months because they're not common. You can't just go to a Reebok store and get orange tennis shoes. Probably from Europe, special order or something like that. Right, but he got his orange tennis shoes. Became even more famous for his bright orange Reebok tennis shoes rather than the high tops, the Vans high tops. But that principle, it can be done, right? It may be hard, but it can be done, right? And what are the qualities of those who did it? What qualities they develop? What part of which is like it can be done, right? And if I put forth the right energy, I think in Mahatma Gandhi's, if you were in a collection of his statements. I think the most important, right? He says, "I am an ordinary man with less than ordinary abilities, right? But anyone can attain what I've attained if they put forth the same effort in the same direction, right?" He says, "I'm actually lower than normal, not below average ability, but I did something. I put forth the energy in a certain direction, and I've attained something, right? Both spiritually and politically, or however you meant it." So anybody can do the same thing. So that's so it's not like, well, you look at a weak person can't climb a mountain, but a weak person can become a strong person and then climb the mountain. The qualities have to be developed, including this positive attitude, the positive view, self-view of life, and a good, healthy disposition. Yet at the same time, remember that first verse, that weird verse, excessive mirth. Right. Let's say at the same time, excessive mirth or anudarsha should be avoided. Excessive mirth makes us unfit for serious thought. It also fritters away the energies of the mind in vain. So it's not just happiness, right? There's a tendency. The problem is that excessive happiness is good, but it's that the bliss bunny happiness, whatever. Even if the energies and the experiences that are generating that expression are real, they get in that superficial. He keeps coming. He uses the word excessive. So it's not mirth. Excessive immersion, it gets waste, it gets frittered. Even the energy that leads to that experience gets wasted in being expressed. It's not that we should not express ourselves, right? But we shouldn't express ourselves also, right? Like Swami Bhajanananda says that your own spiritual experiences you don't talk about. You talk to your guru and maybe one friend. We all have that one friend we can talk our spiritual struggles and experiences with, right? We have to. There's a human need for that. But when we remember the other night, Nimkrali Baba, he says, don't talk about your spiritual experience, don't talk about your wife, and don't talk about your bank balance, your business. Otherwise, all three of them will leave you. Right? If you talk about your wife or husband, they'll leave you. Right? If you talk about your religion, your spiritual experiences, they leave you. Right? You talk about your money, it leaves you. Right? So and also excessiveness could be, it's like material joy and material misery are both material, right? And between the two of them, actually, which one's better? We usually think, happiness is better than misery. That's natural. No, happiness is more pleasant than misery. It may or may not be better. I remember one Swami, Varshana Maharaj, Vaishnava Swami, he told me, he says, actually between the two, actually materially they're actually the same. They're just the world of duality, the two extremes of the world of duality, right? Happiness and misery are the same. Just like even health and sickness, these are just extremes of the continuum of all the ways you can be in the physical world. He says, spiritually, of course, it's psychologically, we should want to be happy, and we should be happy. We should want to be healthy, and we should be healthy. That's a psychological necessity, right? But he says, but actually, when you're very, very happy, often you forget religion, right? And sometimes when one is suffering, one calls out to God, right? So even though they're both materially the same, spiritually, sometimes, not always the time, it's not glorifying misery. There's a danger in glorifying suffering and misery and poverty, and you can get caught into that in religion also. We don't want to do that. But you can see when we are struggling, then we get, because when you're suffering in the world, also you see the limitation of the world. Maybe try to transcend it. When everything is going super awesome, and you're going super awesome, and everybody knows you're super awesome, there's not much reason to transcend that, right? You can get easily caught in it, or literally, as Swamiji said, it fritters away the energies. Right. We sometimes in our little sub-community here, we sometimes say we should digest our experiences, right? And so we're also told. I mean, we in our guru line also that we're encouraged, or we're corrected if we overdo, not to overly express our spiritual emotions, right? We're not showing physical kriyas and laughing and crying and tear. So we're trying not to do that. There's other traditions and other groups. A lot of it's the psychology of a group, right? If other people do it, then you're going to do it. If somebody starts speaking in tongues, you're going to start speaking. If somebody starts shaking, you're going to start shaking. You see a group of people that shows the physical kriyas, pretty soon everybody does it, and you almost can't help not doing it. You get caught up into if people are very. There's a scene with Sri Ramakrishna in his room. There's an ecstatic kirtan. Ecstatic, right? We always use the word ecstatic kirtan. Come to Kali Mandir, ecstatic kirtan, And Sri Ramakrishna dancing, right? And everybody dancing, and pretty soon people are dancing, and they're fainting, and they're passing out, and they're shaking and crying, mom, rolling on the floor. Quite a scene, you can imagine. It's described as a very dramatic scene, right? Afterward, an observer who was like, it's a lot. Sri Ramakrishna created, around him. He asked Sri Ramakrishna who there had actually attained ecstasy. And so he stopped to think about it. He says, one, Swami Bhajanananda, right? He's the only one. Everybody else, they got caught up in the emotion of it and they externalized it. And it was one of their peak. They probably a peak experience of their life, right? But they got caught into the expression of it, and maybe it wasn't as transformative as it could have been. But still, if your tradition is, and if you're conscious and you practice. Not overly expressing, not overly showing, still sometime it comes, right? Then the yogis say that's considered authentic. If you try not to show emotion in a spiritual emotion, and still in the middle of something you start crying, right? It's not because you're not crying because your ego gets caught up to it. You want people to see how devotion you are, and you want yourself to see how devotion, all the things you, in spite of all you're trying to do, still sometime it comes. This is the overboiling of milk, right? It happens. It can't stop. You can't blame milk for overboiling. It's what it does when it gets, So it's important. Yet at the same time, excessive mirth of anudarsha should be avoided. Excessive mirth makes the mind unfit for serious thought. It also fritters away the energy of the mind in vain. The stronger the will, the less the yielding to the sway of emotions. Excessive hilarity is quite as objectionable as too much of sad seriousness. Religious realization is possible only when the mind is in a steady, peaceful condition of harmonious equilibrium. It is thus that one may begin to learn how to love the Lord. That's the ending of that chapter. So the next chapter we'll read next week, God willing. Yeah, this is about the devotees, the bhaktas' renunciation. Very different. The real. Anyway, my tendency is I start talking and give the whole thing away and have to repeat it. Then I'll try to repeat it next week, and then the following week I'll recap it and repeat it again. But as a result, we're always late to RT. Anyways, thank you for your kind attention. I would stop for questions, but we have 3 minutes for RT. So, well, if you can push the button thingy. Jai Mal to all the devotees watching online.